Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Writer's Block, a short web series where we discuss writing and tips for writers, specifically at Fordham University and today Hogwarts, but also for writers in general anywhere. And today we're going to be having a discussion about crafting an argument. And we're going to be going over live in front of you all how we might go about that. So I've got a piece of writing that I'm going to show Peter, and then we're going to see if we can't craft an original argument about it. And sort of give the impetus or the start of a new paper that might be on this writing. So in general, though, Peter, what are some of your experiences with undergrads or just new writers in general and their use of argument?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know in my own composition classes, sometimes students will think they have an argument, but actually they just have a summary of a text or something else. Or they will have an argument, but it'll be far too large, right? We sometimes call this the what is it, the once upon a time argument, or
the universe.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, not the once upon a time argument, the since the beginning of time argument. That's
Yes.
it. Where in a 3-page paper you'll attempt to prove that in the course of human history, democracy has been better than fascism, right? Which is impossible to do in 3 pages. So the two things that come to mind are just making sure that you have an argument and that it's not summary or something else, and then making sure that it's appropriate size.
Absolutely. I like to make the distinction between writing about something and then making an argument. And that writing about something is oftentimes a great place to start your argument because it starts familiarizing you with material. But many times we get papers in that are almost like a book report, telling us what happened in a situation. For instance, if you've been assigned Dracula, or if you've been assigned Frankenstein, you might write about what happened in it and then repeat some common theories about it and then end with, and that's why Dracula is important. But you didn't actually say anything new. And I think a key part in any argument is you are saying something new. You're engaging with other arguments or pointing out something that no one has ever pointed out before. So in academia, we call this, like contributing to new original thought or some other, very, very long idea there. But it's just saying that you're saying something that maybe no one has thought of before. And that can seem very, very imposing for someone who's 17 or 18 or coming back to the university after a long break. But really, chances are you are able to say something new from your own perspective. And I like to start this like making the difference between writing about something versus writing an argument. Is that whatever it is that you were writing about, you probably have a topic in there that you're most interested in. And so you start with writing about, you sort of narrow it down to your topic, write about that topic, and then decide what you want to say about it, why it matters, what's causing it, what the author intends to do with it. All of these, which sort of give you causes, either it is the cause of something or it happened because of something, that gets you into argument territory. That's a lot more pointed than just writing about something. So 3 things that most arguments have. First are reasons. If you don't have reasons for your argument, you're just kind of throwing your thoughts into the air. And, I can say that the government is run by aliens. Why? Well, because I don't have a reason. The next thing it has is evidence. Same thing. Do I have evidence the government is run by aliens? Probably not. And the final thing that we need is limits. And this is how far your argument actually goes, or recognizing places where it may not apply. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, I think those are 3 really good ways to think about arguments. And I suppose one other element that this makes me think of is just that you can test your argument. Just you want to test what you're saying to see if it's arguable, right? Mm-hmm. So I see you have on your fabulous Harry Potter scarf today. And so you could write a fascinating paper that claims that JK Rowling in those books builds a fascinating alternate magical world. And that would be true. And it might be an interesting paper, but no one's going to argue against that, right? It's just, it's not arguable. That would just be summary. And so you want to test it, and you want to imagine an astute person contesting your argument, making a counter argument. So for example, I might say that the 4 houses at Hogwarts stand for 4 types of government, right? I could assert that argument, and then I can imagine someone parrying with a counter argument. And once I've done that, I know I have a reasonable argument.
Yeah. Going back to even just JK Rowling creating a magical world, we can do the thing where we bring the author in and say, well, JK Rowling wrote this magical world because she was in a very dark place at her time and she needed a bit of like fantasy or escapism. And someone can obviously counter that with like, well, maybe she was writing it before this, or, there are places where other people can intervene and you're not trying to just have the final word on something. You do have a limit to it, or other places where other people can weigh in. The rule here is, would someone logically be able to contest you? Would someone arguing the other point not sound insane? Yep. And that's, that sounds like pushing it to an extreme, but really, if someone says, if someone were to say, no, the 4 houses in Hogwarts aren't the 4 types of government, they're 4 types of people. Well, they said no, and then they've given us a little bit more. And this kind of gets into the types of arguments. That is, you can kind of break down arguments between yes and no, agree and disagree, because we should include other people's views in anything that we're writing. So I like to say that we have a yes and, which is agreeing with someone and then pushing their argument a little bit further or applying it to a specific situation. And we have agreeing with a difference. So you might agree with the premise of something, but for different reasons. So maybe JK Rowling created this world not because she was in a dark place, but because she wanted to help other people get out of dark places, right? So like, it's agreeing, yeah, but we have a different motivation in there. Then we've got disagreements, which you can disagree on reasons and evidence, but just shooting down someone else is not really making your own argument. It's just saying, no, you're wrong. And in our own writing, if we do say that, we almost always want to have a new explanation. This may not be right, is probably the nicer way to say it. And here is why, and here's what I think actually is the answer. We always do kind of want to provide solutions. Thoughts?
I think the only thing I would add is that you want to be civil, right? If you're responding to an essay, you don't want to say that the author is an idiot and completely wrong, and here's my arguments. You want to say, while so-and-so has done interesting research on X, I would like to focus on Y, perhaps a point they've overlooked. One of the reasons is because if you stay in academia, you may meet this person down the line, right? This is relevant, especially for graduate students. You never want to, engage in unfair attacks on people.
I have actually had that experience where I've met someone that I disagreed with, but I actually loved their work. I just happened to have a different take on it at a conference. They'd been sitting in the audience at one of my papers, and they came up to talk to me afterwards. I didn't recognize them. And following a discussion and introduction, I was like, oh my God, I just met the person that I'd cited.
Yep.
I would also say that this doesn't necessarily apply to data-driven arguments or scientific papers. You do want to be cordial and all that kind of stuff. But in scientific papers, because you're mainly drawing from your data and then just sort of saying, this is what the data shows, you never want to stress your argument too far. You never want to, pull in things from other people just to say no, because science itself is that saying no, showing whether or not something repeats, shows our best understanding of science at the time. And that's not necessarily something for you to like call out in scientific writing or science communicating writing. So with that out of the way, I thought we would take a look at a story that I love to teach, which is The Tale of Three Brothers from Harry Potter, written by Beedle the Bard, but actually JK Rowling. I'm going to go ahead and share this with Peter. What we're going to do is we're going to cut here, and rejoin in just a minute, and we'll get some thoughts on arguments that can be made about this writing. I'll include the writing below as well. And we're back. Peter mentioned that there's also a video clip of this story, so we'll include that below for any teachers who may want to use it in their class. So Peter, where do you think? Where are some argument threads that we could start tugging on?
Sure. So again, I'll just say that in the interim when we went away, I read the story for the first time. And so just like you, when you're encountering a text for the first time or a prompt for the first time, I'm in like those very early stages. So if I'm thinking about arguments in this story, I might look for symbolism, right? Like, do each of the three brothers stand for someone or something, some larger idea?
Yeah.
I can imagine putting forth arguments regarding that. And I suppose I might also ask, like, what's the moral of the story, right? I can imagine making an argument about what this story means, what lesson it contains, focusing on that third brother.
Yeah, the idea of like showing a good death as equals. And I think like a reading that focuses on that final line of meeting death as equals is important, because that has the argument that the other two deaths were not, like, their lives were not equal to death,
right.
So that there was an imbalance. So is only accepting it make you equal to this like grand notion? After all, death here is incredibly powerful, and to meet him as an equal, it's a kind of makes a statement about the kind of person who meets them. One of the things that I like to think of is just to pick a word or an idea that comes up a lot. In this case, brotherhood. Why is it important that these are brothers?
That is a good question.
And for me, I think, I could pull at any number of things, but let's see what you might think about, just like narrowing down your focus there.
In terms of brothers?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they're brothers, that's sort of that's a key part of many fables, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of three people who all come from the same circumstances. So they're similar in the beginning, which makes their different actions seem all the more distinct or different. Professor Pratt, I'm stumped. I'm so curious what you're.
I'm not looking for a specific answer, which is one of those things. I like to think, oftentimes in fairy tales we have characters stand in for ideas almost metonymically, and so maybe the first brother is pride and anger, and so when pride and anger is given the ability to indulge in itself, it meets an untimely end. And the second one is grief and loss, or like looking back, and that in and of itself is leads to the self death, right? So we've got a death by another, death by the self, and then we have the third one, who is cautious and meets death as an equal, having lived their natural life. So you could take it, maybe one is prudence, the other one wrath, the other one, you could come up with these ideas for them. I like to think of it as past, present, future. You've got one of the brothers, the first brother, is always looking forward to how much more powerful they can become, and in the process doesn't realize how weak they are when they're asleep and gets killed. And then the second one is looking back at the person that he lost, and that becomes his death, because he keeps on looking back and chooses to be in the past rather than the present. And then the one who stayed in the moment, meeting death on the bridge, doesn't trust death because he's not taken in by the promise, just asks to leave. That's the one who lives a full life, staying in the moment. So we can think of it as time almost. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I like that reading. I suppose also the fact that they're brothers makes it a more emotionally affecting story, right? It's better than three strangers go off on this adventure, right? And then they die, and so there's less of an impact on the other characters, right? If they die, so you can imagine the grief when one brother kills himself and the other's murdered. In terms of other arguments or other threads to pull on, you've also made me think about distinguishing between natural death and unnatural death, right? So if there's one given in this story, it's that death is inevitable,
Yeah.
right? And the third brother seems to sense that early on. And so, yeah, I think you could write an interesting paper about the juxtaposition of unnatural death and natural death in this. And yeah.
For sure. You can also write about the idea. I mean, they initially managed to outwit death by just using their creativity, and then ending up in a situation in which they're challenged by it. So it might be a warning about the kind of skills that people develop, the kind of training. Don't get too high and mighty about it, and don't use it as a chance to just live in the past. You can make an argument about the actual building of the bridge. What is that river supposed to symbolize? There's a whole bunch of different things. I think any one of those could be a good topic for like a short paper on this. We haven't even touched about bringing in JK Rowling herself, or talking about the fairy tale structure and form.
You've said a couple interesting things. One of which was you would focus on brothers because it's a word that appears many times in the story. Mm-hmm. And this is a good tactic for building an argument. What terms are recurring, right? What words appear again and again? Because this is a great way to fold in a numbers-based argument, right? Data into an otherwise pretty subjective, humanistic paper. So for all of those viewers out there who are sometimes skeptical of argument-driven English papers, right? You can spin it, if you like, as a data-driven, here's my data, this word is used 11 times, that's indisputable, and here are my claims from that.
Yeah, it's a short paper, right? It's a short story. So anything that's happening a lot, that author is really trying to drive home. So make an argument about why that's the case.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's pretty good. A kind of an overview of some of the threads that we could pull out in this. And then if you wanted to make an argument about the larger world that it's in, or about the author, you could easily do that. But anything else, Peter? Otherwise, we'll wrap it on up.
I guess a final note, and again, I see this all the time in my Composition 2 class, is that especially for a 3-page paper, you wouldn't want to do something like this. You wouldn't want to say, this is a story about death. We can interpret death this way. That connects to the 20th century. And let's think about death in World War II, right? Because then you're talking about something else. You want to keep this a story, or an essay about the story, right?
Yes, absolutely. I would also say, don't be afraid of being wrong, because any good argument, someone has the ability to say, no, you're wrong.
Yep.
So you got to be comfortable with saying something that could be proven otherwise. And you need to understand the scenario in which you would accept being proven wrong. And that's kind of confidence in your writing.
That's a really good point. And I feel like it's important to remember that your professor doesn't need to agree with you. They just need to acknowledge that you have a good argument.
Absolutely. At least a good professor.
Yes.
All right. Hopefully like the ones at Fordham. All right. That'll wrap us up. I hope everyone got something out of this. Teachers, feel free to kind of plug these sort of thoughts into your lessons. We'll have links down below. And with that, a little bit of Irish, Ikasawan, Hona, Ditch, everyone. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Take care.